The news of the disaster to the well had traveled far by this time, and now for 2 or 3 days, a steady avalanche of people had been pouring into the valley. The lower end of the valley was become one huge camp. We should have a good house, no question about that. Criers went the rounds early in the evening and announced the coming attempt, which put every pulse up to fever heat. They gave notice that the abbot and his official suite would move in state and occupy the platform at 10:30, up to which time all the region which was under my ban must be clear. The bells would then cease from tolling, and this sign should be permission to the multitudes to close in and take their places. I was at the platform and all ready to do the honors when the abbot's solemn procession hove in sight, which it did not do till it was nearly to the rope fence, because it was a starless black night and no torches permitted. With it came Merlin and took a front seat on the platform. He was as good as his word for once. One could not see the multitudes banked together beyond the ban, but they were there just the same. The moment the bells stopped, those banked masses broke and poured over the line like a vast black wave, and for as much as a half-hour it continued to flow, and then it solidified itself, and you could have walked upon a pavement of human heads 2, miles. We had a solemn stage wait now for about 20 minutes, a thing I had counted on for effect. It is always good to let your audience have a chance to work up its expectancy. At length, out of the silence, a noble Latin chant, men's voices, broke and swelled up and rolled away into the night, a majestic tide of melody. I had put that up too, and it was one of the best effects I ever invented. When it was finished, I stood up on the platform and extended my hands abroad, for 2 minutes, with my face uplifted. That always produces a dead hush, and then slowly pronounced this ghastly word with a kind of awfulness which caused hundreds to tremble and many women to faint. Konstantinopolitanischer Judelsax Befenmischers Gesellschaft. Just as I was moaning out the closing hunks of that word, I touched off one of my electric connections, and all that murky world of people stood revealed in a hideous blue glare. It was immense, that effect. Lots of people shrieked, women curled up and quit in every direction, foundlings collapsed by platoons. The abbot and the monks crossed themselves nimbly, and their lips fluttered with agitated prayers. Merlin held his grip, but he was astonished clear down to his corns. He had never seen anything to begin with that before. Now was the time to pile in the effects. I lifted my hands and groaned out this word as it were in agony. Nihilisten Dynamit Theater Kieschen Sprengung Satten Tietsversachungen. And turned on the red fire. You should have heard that Atlantic of people moan and howl when that crimson hell joined the blue. After 60 seconds, I shouted. Transvaltra pentro pentran sportrum pelthir traber trongs thrinen tragody. And lit up the green fire. After waiting only 40 seconds this time, I spread my arms abroad and thundered out the devastating syllables of this word of words. Meccamusil mannen passen Menschen oder Murren butter marmor monumenten marker. And whirled on the purple glare. There they were, all going at once, red, blue, green, purple, 4 furious volcanoes pouring vast clouds of radiant smoke aloft and spreading a blinding rainbowed noonday to the furthest confines of that valley. In the distance, one could see that fellow on the pillar standing rigid against the background of sky. His seesaw stopped for the first time in 20 years. I knew the boys were at the pump now and ready. So I said to the abbot, "The time is come, Father. I am about to pronounce the dread name and command the spell to dissolve. You want to brace up and take hold of something." Then I shouted to the people, "Behold, in another minute the spell will be broken, or no mortal can break it. If it break, all will know it, for you will see the sacred water gush from the chapel door." I stood a few moments to let the hearers have a chance to spread my announcement to those who couldn't hear, and so convey it to the furthest ranks. Then I made a grand exhibition of extra posturing and gesturing, and shouted, "Lo, I command the fell spirit that possesses the holy fountain to now disgorge into the skies all the infernal fires that still remain in him, and straightway dissolve his spell and flee hence to the pit, there to lie bound 1,000 years. By his own dread name I command it, BGWJ Gillig." Then I touched off the hogshead of rockets, and a vast fountain of dazzling lances of fire vomited itself toward the zenith with a hissing rush. and burst in mid-sky into a storm of flashing jewels. One mighty groan of terror started up from the massed people, then suddenly broke into a wild hosanna of joy, for there, fair and plain in the uncanny glare, they saw the freed water leaping forth. The old abbot could not speak a word, for tears and the chokings in his throat. Without utterance of any sort, he folded me in his arms and mashed me. It was more eloquent than speech, and harder to get over, too, in a country where there were really no doctors that were worth a damaged nickel. You should have seen those acres of people throw themselves down in that water and kiss it and pet it and fondle it and talk to it as if it were alive and welcome it back with the dear names they gave their darlings, just as if it had been a friend who was long gone away and lost and was come home again. Yes, it was pretty to see and made me think more of them than I had done before. I sent Merlin home on a shutter. He had caved in and gone down like a landslide when I pronounced that fearful name, and had never come to since. He never had heard that name before, neither had I, but to him it was the right one. Any jumble would have been the right one. He admitted afterward that that spirit's own mother could not have pronounced that name better than I did. He never could understand how I survived it, and I didn't tell him. It is only young magicians that give away a secret like that. Merlin spent 3 months working enchantments to try to find out the deep trick of how to pronounce that name and outlive it, but he didn't arrive. When I started to the chapel, the populace uncovered and fell back reverently to make a wide way for me, as if I had been some kind of a superior being, and I was. I was aware of that. I took along a night shift of monks and taught them the mystery of the pump and set them to work, for it was plain that a good part of the people out there were going to sit up with the water all night. Consequently, it was but right that they should have all they wanted of it. To those monks, that pump was a good deal of a miracle itself, and they were full of wonder over it, and of admiration, too, of the exceeding effectiveness of its performance. It was a great night, an immense night. There was reputation in it. I could hardly get to sleep for glorying over it. Chapter 24. A rival magician. My influence in the Valley of Holiness was something prodigious now. It seemed worthwhile to try to turn it to some valuable account. The thought came to me the next morning, and was suggested by my seeing one of my knights who was in the soap line come riding in. According to history, the monks of this place 2 centuries before had been worldly minded enough to want to wash. It might be that there was a leaven of this unrighteousness still remaining, so I sounded a brother. "Wouldn't you like a bath?" He shuddered at the thought of the peril of it to the well, but he said with feeling, "One needs not to ask that of a poor body who has not known that blessed refreshment sith that he was a boy. Would God I might wash me, but it may not be, fair sir, tempt me not, it is forbidden." And then he sighed in such a sorrowful way that I was resolved he should have at least 1 layer of his real estate removed, if it sized up my whole influence and bankrupted the pile. So I went to the abbot and asked for a permit for this brother. He blenched at the idea. I don't mean that you could see him blench, for of course you couldn't see it without you scraped him, and I didn't care enough about it to scrape him, but I knew the blench was there, just the same, and within a book cover's thickness of the surface, too, blenched and trembled. He said, "Ah, son, ask aught else thou wilt, and it is thine, and freely granted out of a grateful heart. But this, oh this, would you drive away the blessed water again?" "No, father, I will not drive it away. I have mysterious knowledge which teaches me that there was an error that other time when it was thought the institution of the bath banished the fountain." A large interest began to show up in the old man's face. "My knowledge informs me that the bath was innocent of that misfortune, which was caused by quite another sort of sin." These are brave words, but right welcome if they be true. They are true, indeed. Let me build the bath again, father. Let me build it again, and the fountain shall flow forever. You promise this, you promise it. Say the word, say you promise it. I do promise it. Then will I have the first bath myself. Go get ye to your work. Tarry not, but go. I and my boys were at work, straight off. The ruins of the old bath were there yet in the basement of the monastery, not a stone missing. They had been left just so, all these lifetimes, and avoided with a pious fear as things accursed. In 2 days we had it all done, and the water in a spacious pool of clear, pure water that a body could swim in. It was running water, too. It came in and went out through the ancient pipes. The old abbot kept his word and was the first to try it. He went down black and shaky, leaving the whole black community above troubled and worried and full of bodings, but he came back white and joyful, and the game was made. Another triumph scored. It was a good campaign that we made in that valley of holiness, and I was very well satisfied and ready to move on now, but I struck a disappointment. I caught a heavy cold, and it started up an old lurking rheumatism of mine. Of course, the rheumatism hunted up my weakest place and located itself there. This was the place where the abbot put his arms about me and mashed me, what time he was moved to testify his gratitude to me with an embrace. When at last I got out, I was a shadow, but everybody was full of attentions and kindnesses, and these brought cheer back into my life, and were the right medicine to help a convalescent swiftly up toward health and strength again, so I gained fast. Sandy was worn out with nursing, so I made up my mind to turn out and go a cruise alone, leaving her at the nunnery to rest up. My idea was to disguise myself as a freeman of peasant degree and wander through the country a week or 2 on foot. This would give me a chance to eat and lodge with the lowliest and poorest class of free citizens on equal terms. There was no other way to inform myself perfectly of their everyday life and the operation of the laws upon it. If I went among them as a gentleman, there would be restraints and conventionalities which would shut me out from their private joys and troubles, and I should get no further than the outside shell. One morning I was out on a long walk to get up muscle for my trip, and had climbed the ridge which bordered the northern extremity of the valley, when I came upon an artificial opening in the face of a low precipice, and recognized it by its location as a hermitage which had often been pointed out to me from a distance as the den, hermit of high renown for dirt and austerity. I knew he had lately been offered a situation in the Great Sahara, where lions and sandflies made the hermit life peculiarly attractive and difficult, and had gone to Africa to take possession, so I thought I would look in and see how the atmosphere of this den agreed with its reputation. My surprise was great. The place was newly swept and scoured. Then there was another surprise. Back in the gloom of the cavern, I heard the clink of a little bell, and then this exclamation. "Hello, Central, is this you, Camelot? Behold, thou mayst glad thy heart, and thou hast faith to believe the wonderful when that it cometh in unexpected guise, and maketh itself manifest in impossible places. Here standeth in the flesh his mightiness the boss, and with thine own ears shall ye hear him speak." Now what a radical reversal of things this was! What a jumbling together of extravagant incongruities! What a fantastic conjunction of opposites and irreconcilables! The home of the bogus miracle become the home of a real one, the den of a medieval hermit turned into a telephone office. The telephone clerk stepped into the light, and I recognized one of my young fellows. I said, "How long has this office been established here, Ulfius?" "But since midnight, fair Sir Boss, and it please you. We saw many lights in the valley, and so judged it well to make a station, for that where so many lights be needs, must they indicate a town of goodly size." "Quite right, it isn't a town in the customary sense, but it's a good stand anyway. Do you know where you are?" Of that I have had no time to make inquiry, for weenas my comradeship moved hence upon their labors, leaving me in charge. I got me to needed rest, purposing to inquire when I waked, and report the place's name to Camelot for record. Well, this is the Valley of Holiness. It didn't he didn't start at the name, as I had supposed he would. He merely said, "I will so report it." Why, the surrounding regions are filled with the noise of late wonders that have happened here. You didn't hear of them. Ah, ye will remember we move by night, and avoid speech with all. We learn not, but that we get by the telephone from Camelot. Why, they know all about this thing. Haven't they told you anything about the great miracle of the restoration of a holy fountain? Oh, that, indeed, yes. But the name of this valley doth woundily differ from the name of that one. Indeed, to differ wider were not pose. What was that name, then? The Valley of Hellishness. That explains it. Confound a telephone anyway. It is the very demon for conveying similarities of sound that are miracles of divergence from similarity of sense. But no matter, you know the name of the place now. Call up Camelot. He did it and had Clarence sent for. It was good to hear my boy's voice again. It was like being home. After some affectionate interchanges and some account of my late illness, I said, "What is new?" "The king and queen and many of the court do start even in this hour, to go to your valley to pay pious homage to the waters ye have restored, and cleanse themselves of sin, and see the place where the infernal spirits spouted true hell flames to the clouds. And ye listen sharply, ye may hear me wink, and hear me likewise smile a smile. Sith, 'twas I that made selection of those flames from out our stock, and sent them by your order." Does the king know the way to this place? The king, no, nor to any other in his realms, mayhap, but the lads that help you with your miracle will be his guide and lead the way, and appoint the places for rests at noons and sleeps at night. This will bring them here, when? Mid-afternoon, or later, the third day. Anything else in the way of news? The king hath begun the raising of the standing army ye suggested to him. One regiment is complete and officered. The mischief, I wanted a main hand in that myself. There is only one body of men in the kingdom that are fitted to officer a regular army. Yes, and now ye will marvel to know there's not so much as one West Pointer in that regiment. What are you talking about? Are you in earnest? It is truly as I have said. Why, this makes me uneasy. Who were chosen, and what was the method? Competitive examination. Indeed, I know not of the method. I but know this: these officers be all of noble family, and are born, what is it you call it, chuckleheads. There's something wrong, Clarence. Comfort yourself, then, for 2 candidates for a lieutenancy do travel hence with the king, young nobles both, and if you but wait where you are you will hear them questioned. That is news to the purpose. I will get one West Pointer in anyway. Mount a man and send him to that school with a message. Let him kill horses, if necessary, but he must be there before sunset tonight and say, "There is no need. I have laid a ground wire to the school. Prithee let me connect you with it." It sounded good. In this atmosphere of telephones and lightning communication with distant regions, I was breathing the breath of life again after long suffocation. I realized then what a creepy, dull, inanimate horror this land had been to me all these years, and how I had been in such a stifled condition of mind as to have grown used to it almost beyond the power to notice it. I gave my order to the superintendent of the academy personally. I also asked him to bring me some paper and a fountain pen and a box or so of safety matches. I was getting tired of doing without these conveniences. I could have them now, as I wasn't going to wear armor any more at present, and therefore could get at my pockets. When I got back to the monastery, I found a thing of interest going on. The abbot and his monks were assembled in the great hall, observing with childish wonder and faith the performances of a new magician, a fresh arrival. His dress was the extreme of the fantastic, as showy and foolish as the sort of thing an Indian medicine man wears. He was mowing and mumbling and gesticulating and drawing mystical figures in the air and on the floor, the regular thing, you know. He was a celebrity from Asia, so he said, and that was enough. That sort of evidence was as good as gold and passed current everywhere. How easy and cheap it was to be a great magician on this fellow's terms. His specialty was to tell you what any individual on the face of the globe was doing at the moment, and what he had done at any time in the past, and what he would do at any time in the future. He asked if any would like to know what the Emperor of the East was doing now. The sparkling eyes and the delighted rubbing of hands made eloquent answer. This reverend crowd would like to know what that monarch was at, just as this moment. The fraud went through some more mummery, and then made grave announcement. The high and mighty Emperor of the East doth at this moment put money in the palm of a holy begging friar. 1, 2, 3 pieces, and they be all of silver. A buzz of admiring exclamations broke out. all around. It is marvelous, wonderful, what study, what labor, to have acquired a so amazing power as this. Would they like to know what the Supreme Lord of India was doing? Yes, he told them what the Supreme Lord of India was doing. Then he told them what the Sultan of Egypt was at, also what the King of the remote seas was about. And so on and so on, and with each new marvel, the astonishment at his accuracy rose higher and higher. They thought he must surely strike an uncertain place some time, but no, he never had to hesitate, he always knew, and always with unerring precision. I saw that if this thing went on I should lose my supremacy, this fellow would capture my following, I should be left out in the cold. I must put a cog in his wheel, and do it right away, too, I said. If I might ask, I should very greatly like to know what a certain person is doing. Speak, and freely, I will tell you. It will be difficult, perhaps impossible. My art knoweth not that word. The more difficult it is, the more certainly will I reveal it to you. You see, I was working up the interest. It was getting pretty high, too. You could see that by the craning necks all around and the half-suspended breathing. So now I climaxed it. If you make no mistake, if you tell me truly what I want to know, I will give you 200 silver pennies. The fortune is mine, I will tell you what you would know. Then tell me what I am doing with my right hand. There was a general gasp of surprise. It had not occurred to anybody in the crowd, that simple trick of inquiring about somebody who wasn't 10,000 miles away. The magician was hit hard. It was an emergency that had never happened in his experience before, and it corked him. He didn't know how to meet it. He looked stunned, confused. He couldn't say a word. Come, I said, what are you waiting for? Is it possible you can answer up right off and tell what anybody on the other side of the earth is doing, and yet can't tell what a person is doing who isn't 3 yards from you? Persons behind me know what I am doing with my right hand. They will endorse you if you tell correctly. He was still dumb. Very well, I'll tell you why you don't speak up and tell. It is because you do know. You're a magician. Good friends, this tramp is a mere fraud and liar. This distressed the monks and terrified them. They were not used to hearing these awful beings called names, and they did not know what might be the consequence. There was a dead silence now. Superstitious bodings were in every mind. The magician began to pull his wits together, and when he presently smiled an easy, nonchalant smile, it spread a mighty relief around, for it indicated that his mood was not destructive. He said, "It hath struck me speechless, the frivolity of this person's speech. Let all know, if perchance there be any who know it not, that enchanters of my degree deign not to concern themselves with the doings of any but kings, princes, emperors, them that be born in the purple, and them only. Had ye asked me what Arthur the great king is doing, it were another matter, and I had told ye, but the doings of a subject interest me not." "Oh, I misunderstood you. I thought you said anybody, and so I supposed anybody included, well, anybody, that is, everybody. It doth anybody that is of lofty birth, and the better if he be royal." "That it meseemeth might well be," said the abbot, who saw his opportunity to smooth things and avert disaster, for it were not likely that so wonderful a gift as this would be conferred for the revelation of the concerns of lesser beings than such as be born near to the summits of greatness. Our Arthur the king. "Would you know of him?" broke in the enchanter. "Most gladly, yea, and gratefully." Everybody was full of awe and interest again right away, the incorrigible idiots. They watched the incantations absorbingly and looked at me with a "there, now, what can you say to that?" air when the announcement came. "The king is weary with the chase, and lieth in his palace these 2 hours sleeping a dreamless sleep." "God's benison upon him," said the abbot, and crossed himself. "May that sleep be to the refreshment of his body and his soul." "And so it might be, if he were sleeping," I said, "but the king is not sleeping, the king rides." Here was trouble again, a conflict of authority. Nobody knew which of us to believe. I still had some reputation left. The magician's scorn was stirred, and he said, "Lo, I have seen many wonderful soothsayers and prophets and magicians in my life days, but none before that could sit idle and see to the heart of things with never an incantation to help. You have lived in the woods and lost much by it. I use incantations myself, as this good brotherhood are aware, but only on occasions of moment. When it comes to sarcasming, I reckon I know how to keep my end up. That jab made this fellow squirm. The abbot inquired after the queen and the court, and got this information. They be all on sleep, being overcome by fatigue, like as to the king. I said, that is merely another lie. Half of them are about their amusements. The queen and the other half are not sleeping, they ride. Now perhaps you can spread yourself a little, and tell us where the king and queen and all that are this moment riding with them are going. They sleep now, as I said, but on the morrow they will ride, for they go a journey toward the sea. And where will they be the day after tomorrow at vespers? Far to the north of Camelot, and half their journey will be done. That is another lie, by the space of 150 miles. Their journey will not be merely half done, it will be all done, and they will be here, in this valley. That was a noble shot. It set the abbot and the monks in a whirl of excitement, and it rocked the enchanter to his base. I followed the thing right up. If the king does not arrive, I will have myself ridden on a rail. If he does, I will ride you on a rail instead. However, it was not good politics to let the king come without any fuss and feathers at all. So I went down and drummed up a procession of pilgrims and smoked out a batch of hermits and started them out at 2 o'clock to meet him. And that was the sort of state he arrived in. The abbot was helpless with rage and humiliation when I brought him out on a balcony and showed him the head of the state marching in, and never a monk on hand to offer him welcome, and no stir of life or clang of joy-bell to glad his spirit. He took one look, and then flew to rouse out his forces. The next minute the bells were dinning furiously, and the various buildings were vomiting monks and nuns, who went swarming in a rush toward the coming procession, and with them went that magician, and he was on a rail too by the abbot's order, and his reputation was in the mud, and mine was in the sky again. Yes, a man can keep his trademark current in such a country, but he can't sit around and do it. He has got to be on deck and attending to business right along. Chapter 25. A competitive examination. When the king traveled for change of air, or made a progress, or visited a distant noble whom he wished to bankrupt with the cost of his keep, part of the administration moved with him. It was a fashion of the time. The commission charged with the examination of candidates for posts in the army came with the king to the valley, whereas they could have transacted their business just as well at home. And although this expedition was strictly a holiday excursion for the king, he kept some of his business functions going just the same. He touched for the evil, as usual. He held court in the gate at sunrise and tried cases, for he was himself Chief Justice of the King's Bench. He shone very well in this latter office. He was a wise and humane judge, and he clearly did his honest best and fairest, according to his lights. That is a large reservation. His lights, I mean his rearing, often colored his decisions. Whenever there was a dispute between a noble or gentleman and a person of lower degree, the king's leanings and sympathies were for the former class always, whether he suspected it or not. It was impossible that this should be otherwise. The blunting effects of slavery upon the slaveholders' moral perceptions are known and conceded, the world over, and a privileged class, an aristocracy, is but a band of slaveholders under another name. This has a harsh sound, and yet should not be offensive to any, even to the noble himself, unless the fact itself be an offense, for the statement simply formulates a fact. The repulsive feature of slavery is the thing, not its name. One needs but to hear an aristocrat speak of the classes that are below him to recognize, and in but indifferently modified measure, the very air and tone of the actual slaveholder, and behind these are the slaveholder's spirit, the slaveholder's blunted feeling. They are the result of the same cause in both cases, the possessor's old and inbred custom of regarding himself as a superior being. The king's judgments wrought frequent injustices, but it was merely the fault of his training, his natural and unalterable sympathies. He was as unfitted for a judgeship as would be the average mother for the position of milk distributor to starving children in famine time. Her own children would fare a shade better than the rest. One very curious case came before the king. a young girl, an orphan, who had a considerable estate, married a fine young fellow who had nothing. The girl's property was within a seigneury held by the church. The bishop of the diocese, an arrogant scion of the great nobility, claimed the girl's estate on the ground that she had married privately, and thus had cheated the church out of one of its rights as lord of the seigneury, the one heretofore referred to as le droit du seigneur. The penalty of refusal or avoidance was confiscation. The girl's defense was that the lordship of the seigneury was vested in the bishop, and the particular right here involved was not transferable, but must be exercised by the lord himself or stand vacated, and that an older law of the church itself strictly barred the bishop from exercising it. It was a very odd case, indeed. It reminded me of something I had read in my youth about the ingenious way in which the aldermen of London raised the money that built the Mansion House. A person who had not taken the sacrament according to the Anglican rite could not stand as a candidate for Sheriff of London. Thus dissenters were ineligible. They could not run if asked. They could not serve if elected. The aldermen, who without any question were Yankees in disguise, hit upon this neat device. They passed a bylaw imposing a fine of L400 upon anyone who should refuse to be a candidate for sheriff, and a fine of L600 upon any person who, after being elected sheriff, refused to serve. Then they went to work and elected a lot of dissenters, one after another, and kept it up until they had collected L15000 in fines. And there stands the stately Mansion House to this day, to keep the blushing citizen in mind of a long past and lamented day when a band of Yankees slipped into London and played games of the sort that has given their race a unique and shady reputation among all truly good and holy peoples that be in the earth. The girl's case seemed strong to me. The bishop's case was just as strong. I did not see how the king was going to get out of this hole, but he got out. I append his decision. Truly I find small difficulty here, the matter being even a child's affair for simpleness. And the young bride had conveyed notice, as in duty bound, to her feudal lord and proper master and protector the bishop. She had suffered no loss, for the said bishop could have got a dispensation making him, for temporary conveniency, eligible to the exercise of his said right, and thus would she have kept all she had. Whereas, failing in her first duty, she hath by that failure failed in all. For whoso, clinging to a rope, severeth it above his hands must fall, it being no defence to claim that the rest of the rope is sound, neither any deliverance from his peril as he shall find. Pardy, the woman's case is rotten at the source. It is the decree of the court that she forfeit to the said Lord Bishop all her goods, even to the last farthing that she doth possess, and be thereto mulcted in the costs. Next. Here was a tragic end to a beautiful honeymoon not yet 3 months old. Poor young creatures, they had lived these 3 months lapped to the lips in worldly comforts. These clothes and trinkets they were wearing were as fine and dainty as the shrewdest stretch of the sumptuary laws allowed to people of their degree. And in these pretty clothes, she crying on his shoulder, and he trying to comfort her with hopeful words set to the music of despair, they went from the judgment seat out into the world homeless, bedless, breadless. Why, the very beggars by the roadsides were not so poor as they. Well, the king was out of the hole, and on terms satisfactory to the church and the rest of the aristocracy, no doubt. Men write many fine and plausible arguments in support of monarchy, but the fact remains that where every man in a state has a vote, brutal laws are impossible. Arthur's people were of course poor material for a republic, because they had been debased so long by monarchy, and yet even they would have been intelligent enough to make short work of that law which the king had just been administering, if it had been submitted to their full and free vote. There is a phrase which has grown so common in the world's mouth that it has come to seem to have sense and meaning, the sense and meaning implied when it is used. That is the phrase which refers to this or that or the other nation as possibly being capable of self-government, and the implied sense of it is that there has been a nation somewhere, some time or other, which wasn't capable of it, wasn't as able to govern itself as some self-appointed specialists were or would be to govern it. The masterminds of all nations in all ages have sprung in affluent multitude from the mass of the nation, and from the mass of the nation only, not from its privileged classes. And so, no matter what the nation's intellectual grade was, whether high or low, The bulk of its ability was in the long ranks of its nameless and its poor, and so it never saw the day that it had not the material in abundance whereby to govern itself, which is to assert an always self-proven fact, that even the best governed and most free and most enlightened monarchy is still behind the best condition attainable by its people, and that the same is true of kindred governments of lower grades, all the way down to the lowest. King Arthur had hurried up the army business altogether, beyond my calculations. I had not supposed he would move in the matter while I was away, and so I had not mapped out a scheme for determining the merits of officers. I had only remarked that it would be wise to submit every candidate to a sharp and searching examination, and privately I meant to put together a list of military qualifications that nobody could answer to but my West Pointers. That ought to have been attended to before I left, for the king was so taken with the idea of a standing army that he couldn't wait but must get about it at once, and get up as good a scheme of examination as he could invent out of his own head. I was impatient to see what this was, and to show, too, how much more admirable was the one which I should display to the examining board. I intimated this gently to the king, and it fired his curiosity. When the board was assembled, I followed him in, and behind us came the candidates. One of these candidates was a bright young West Pointer of mine, and with him were a couple of my West Point professors. When I saw the board, I did not know whether to cry or to laugh. The head of it was the officer known to later centuries as Norrie King-at-Arms. The two other members were chiefs of bureaus in his department, and all three were priests, of course. All officials who had to know how to read and write were priests. My candidate was called first, out of courtesy to me, and the head of the board opened on him with official solemnity. Name: Malleys, son of Webster. Webster, H.M. I my memory faileth to recall the name. Condition: Weaver, God keep us. The king was staggered. From his summit to his foundations, one clerk fainted, and the others came near it. The chairman pulled himself together and said indignantly, "It is sufficient, get you hence." But I appealed to the king. I begged that my candidate might be examined. The king was willing, but the board, who were all well-born folk, implored the king to spare them the indignity of examining the weaver's son. I knew they didn't know enough to examine him anyway, so I joined my prayers to theirs, and the king turned the duty over to my professors. I had had a blackboard prepared, and it was put up now, and the circus began. It was beautiful to hear the lad lay out the science of war, and wallow in details of battle and siege, of supply, transportation, mining and countermining, grand tactics, big strategy and little strategy, signal service, infantry, cavalry, artillery, and all about siege guns, field guns, Gatling guns, rifled guns, smooth bores, musket practice, revolver practice, and not a solitary word of it all could these catfish make head or tail of, you understand. And it was handsome to see him chalk off mathematical nightmares on the blackboard that would stump the angels themselves, and do it like nothing, too, all about eclipses, and comets, and solstices, and constellations, and mean time, and sidereal time, and dinner time, and bedtime, and every other imaginable thing above the clouds or under them that you could harry or bullyrag an enemy with, and make him wish he hadn't come. And when the boy made his military salute and stood aside at last, I was proud enough to hug him, and all those other people were so dazed they looked partly petrified, partly drunk, and wholly caught out and snowed under. I judged that the cake was ours, and by a large majority. Education is a great thing. This was the same youth who had come to West Point so ignorant that, when I asked him, if a general officer should have a horse shot under him on the field of battle, what ought he to do, answered up naively and said, "Get up and brush himself." One of the young nobles was called up now. I thought I would question him a little myself. I said, "Can your lordship read?" His face flushed indignantly, and he fired this at me. "Takest me for a clerk? I trow I am not of a blood that—" "Answer the question." He crowded his wrath down and made out to answer no. Can you write? He wanted to resent this too, but I said, you will confine yourself to the questions and make no comments. You are not here to air your blood or your graces, and nothing of the sort will be permitted. Can you write? No. Do you know the multiplication table? I wit not what ye refer to. How much is 9 times 6? It is a mystery that is hidden from me by reason that the emergency requiring the fathoming of it hath not in my life days occurred, and so, not having no need to know this thing, I abide barren of the knowledge. If a trade a barrel of onions to be, worth 2 pence the bushel, in exchange for a sheep worth 4 pence and a dog worth a penny, and 100 kill the dog before delivery, because bitten by the same, who mistook him for 500, what sum is still due to a from B, and which party pays for the dog 100 or 500, and who gets the money? If A, is the penny sufficient, or may he claim consequential damages in the form of additional money to represent the possible profit which might have inured from the dog, and classifiable as earned increment, that is to say, usufruct. Verily, in the all-wise and unknowable providence of God, who moveth in mysterious ways his wonders to perform, have I never heard the fellow to this question for confusion of the mind and congestion of the ducts of thought. Wherefore I beseech you let the dog and the onions, and these people of the strange and godless names work out their several salvations from their piteous and wonderful difficulties without help of mine. For indeed their trouble is sufficient as it is, whereas an I tried to help I should, but damage their cause the more, and yet mayhap not live myself to see the desolation wrought. What do you know of the laws of attraction and gravitation? If there be such, mayhap his grace the king did promulgate them, whilst that I lay sick about the beginning of the year, and thereby failed to hear his proclamation. What do you know of the science of optics? I know of governors of places, and seneschals of castles, and sheriffs of counties, and many like small offices and titles of honor, but him you call the science of optics I have not heard of before. Peradventure, it is a new dignity. Yes, in this country. Try to conceive of this mollusk gravely applying for an official position of any kind under the sun. Why, he had all the earmarks of a typewriter copyist, if you leave out the disposition to contribute uninvited emendations of your grammar and punctuation. It was unaccountable that he didn't attempt a little help of that sort out of his majestic supply of incapacity for the job. But that didn't prove that he hadn't material in him for the disposition. It only proved that he wasn't a typewriter copyist yet. After nagging him a little more, I let the professors loose on him, and they turned him inside out, on the line of scientific war, and found him empty, of course. He knew somewhat about the warfare of the time, bushwhacking around for ogres, and bullfights in the tournament ring, and such things, but otherwise he was empty and useless. Then we took the other young noble in hand, and he was the first one's twin, for ignorance and incapacity. I delivered them into the hands of the chairman of the board with the comfortable consciousness that their cake was dough. They were examined in the previous order of precedence. Name, so please you. Pertipole, son of Sir Pertipole, Baron of Barley Mash. Grandfather. Also Sir Pertipole, Baron of Barley Mash. Great-grandfather. The same name and title. Great-great-grandfather. We had none, worshipful sir, the line failing before it had reached so far back. It mattereth not, it is a good 4 generations, and fulfilleth the requirements of the rule. Fulfills what rule? I asked. The rule requiring 4 generations of nobility, or else the candidate is not eligible. A man not eligible for a lieutenancy in the army unless he can prove 4 generations of noble descent. Even so, neither lieutenant nor any other officer may be commissioned without that qualification. Oh come, this is an astonishing thing. What good is such a qualification as that? What good? It is a hardy question, fair sir and boss, since it doth go far to impugn the wisdom of even our holy Mother Church herself. As how? For that she hath established the selfsame rule regarding saints. By her law none may be canonized until he hath lain dead 4 generations. I see, it is the same thing, it is wonderful. In the one case a man lies dead alive 4 generations, mummified in ignorance and sloth, and that qualifies him to command live people and take their weal and woe into his impotent hands. And in the other case, a man lies bedded with death and worms 4 generations, and that qualifies him for office in the celestial camp. Does the king's grace approve of this strange law? The king said, Why truly I see not about it that is strange. All places of honor and of profit do belong, by natural right, to them that be of noble blood, and so these dignities in the army are their property, and would be so without this or any rule. The rule is but to mark a limit. Its purpose is to keep out too recent blood, which would bring into contempt these offices, and men of lofty lineage would turn their backs and scorn to take them. I were to blame, and I permitted this calamity. You can permit it, and you are minded so to do, for you have the delegated authority, but that the king should do it were a most strange madness, and not comprehensible to any. I yield. Proceed, Sir Chief of the Heralds' College. The chairman resumed as follows. By what illustrious achievement, for the honor of the throne and state, did the founder of your great line lift himself to the sacred dignity of the British nobility? He built a brewery. Sire, the board finds this candidate perfect in all the requirements and qualifications for military command, and doth hold his case open for decision after due examination of his competitor.